It's nice to meet you guys. Like you said, my name's Dusty. I'm honored to be here. I love Pastor Tulio. Can we get up for Pastor Tulio? This guy's the man. He has such a genuine heart for Jesus. We've had the honor of getting lunch a handful of times together, and every time I leave encouraged, I leave inspired. And Pastor Raphael, I got to know him even today. I've met him a couple times. His kids actually go to the school at our church. But even today we did a panel, and he talked about how his heart is to just empower people, and he doesn't want the credit for it. He just wants to send people. And I actually, in that moment, talked about how that's a rare quality in a senior pastor. And so can we give it up for Pastor Raphael as well? Come on, the Spirit of God is in this place. Do you guys feel it? I love the name of this conference, Touch of Heaven, because that is what our world needs. A touch from God, a touch of heaven, a move of the Spirit. The things that are broken in this world cannot be fixed by politics. It can't be fixed by doing social activities and helping people. Not that those are bad things, but the only thing that can fix this world is a touch of heaven. And I love that. But here's the thing, and what we're going to be talking about tonight is that in order for there to be a touch of heaven, as the church, this is not a time for us to rock back on our heels and to take it easy and to relax and just to do whatever. This is a time as the church for us to get moving. And if you're taking notes, you can write that at the top of your page. Get moving. Get moving. But I want to say this. You might think I'm going to jump into talking about all the different evangelistic things we can do and all the things we can do in this world. It's going to look probably a little different than you expect, at least what the first step is when it comes to this idea of get moving. Get moving. How many of y'all like working out in here? Anybody like working out? I am not among the people who are raising their hands. I do not like working out. There's a couple, really the biggest reason I don't like it is I like progress. Like I like when I can like leave a project and come back to it like a few days later and then pick right back up. Here's the thing with working out. I could work my tail end off for months, right? Like I could work for 6 months straight in the gym every single day for 2 hours, doing everything I'm supposed to do, eating right, like literally doing everything I'm supposed to do, and I can take 1 month off. I can be like, you know what, I'm looking pretty good. I got the beach spot I was working on. Like, this is good. I'm just going to relax for a month. I'm going to enjoy this body that I've been working so hard for. And in 1 month, and those of you who work out can attest, you can lose like 80% of it, right? Like all of a sudden a little flab starts coming back. Your biceps aren't as cut anymore in 1 month. And so I have a hard time with working out because I'm a dad. And so for me, my schedule is super inconsistent. And I'm sure I'm just making excuses, and people who are all about health, you're like, well, the pastor's just making excuses. Here he goes again. But like honestly, like I have a hard time getting motivated because I'm like, I'm not sure if I get started, I can keep this up for the long haul, just because I know the tempo and the pace of my life. Another example of this, anyone married? I know this is a lot of young people. Any married people? All right, so husbands, let me know if you've ever had this experience. You take your girl on a date, and it is like you put it all. You are Mr. Romance. Take her to her favorite spot, get her ice cream afterward, go sit under the stars, the whole deal. Have these deep conversations. And then 5 days later, she'd be like, babe, I just feel like we're not connected. I just feel like something's not lining up. I don't know. Like, and it's like, as a husband, like, you can't take time off. Like, if you have that date night, you better keep it up for the next week, or else she's going to start feeling distant from you. And here's the thing. When it comes to our walk with Jesus, when it comes to our relationship with God, we feel that same tension. We feel like we're like 2 months, we're strong, we're fighting this temptation, we're overcoming this fear, we're dealing with this brokenness and this pain in our lives, and it seems like we're doing really good. But then we start, all right, I'm feeling good, like I'm walking with Jesus. And then what happens? The enemy blindsides us out of nowhere, and then all of a sudden we can go from feeling so close to Jesus, in a moment we can feel so far from Jesus. It's like we live in this tension of trusting ourselves and trusting God. And it's like we're constantly getting pulled back and forth. It's like when Paul talks about being tossed back and forth by the waves. It's like we want to trust God, but then we get comfortable, we get complacent, and then we go back to trusting ourselves because we were trusting God, but then it got scary and some things came up and we're like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. So we trust ourselves again, and it's this constant pulling back and forth. And tonight I want to talk about this idea of this tension that we feel and how it applies to us as the church to get moving. For us as the church to move into the new things that God has for us. For us as a church to leave the old things and to step into the new. There are seasons where it seems easy to trust God. But then there's seasons where fear sets in because of shame, impatience, pride, and all things kick in out of nowhere, and it can be exhausting. But I have good news that we serve a God who uses the weak things in our lives to draw us closer to him, to trust him more. And I want to do this by talking to you from a story in Exodus chapter 14. If you have your Bibles, you can turn there. I believe it's going to be in this. By the way, this projector is shooting from the floor. That is awesome. I don't know if you guys saw that. I'm just afraid I'm going to get excited and jump on it and fall through. I'll buy you a new glass if that happens. Exodus 14, a lot of you are probably familiar with this story, but just a little bit of context. When we step into this story, the Israelites are slaves. Well, they were slaves in Egypt for 500 years. Just to kind of put that in perspective, that's longer than America's been a country. And so the Israelites were slaves for generations. This wasn't just a handful of years and they want to get back to the promises of God. This has become a way of life. This is how grandkids saw their grandparents and their great-grandparents and their great-great-grandparents live. All they knew was slavery. They didn't know anything else. That in and of itself is a whole other thing you can preach on, but we're not going to go there tonight. And after 500 years of slavery, God calls a man named Moses to set the people free. You guys know the story, the burning bush, go set my people free. He's like, I can't talk. Okay, take Aaron with you. He goes to Israel, or he goes to Egypt. He does all these miracles to convince Pharaoh. Pharaoh's like, I don't want anything to do with it, and I'm not going to let the people go. And so Moses, there's the 10 plagues, right? The frogs, the locusts, the darkness, the blood. The last one is the firstborn of every mammal would die. And all of this happens. And finally, after all of these miracles and all these plagues, finally, Pharaoh's like, okay, if you'll just get out of here, take the Israelites, we don't want to deal with it anymore. If you will just take them and go, you can go. And so that happens, and then as they're leaving, the Bible says that Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and that he changes his mind, and he realizes what he has done, and that he's let the Israelites go. And this is where we're going to pick up in our story tonight, in verse 10. It says this, as Pharaoh approached, the people of Israel looked up and panicked when they saw the Egyptians overtaking them. So Pharaoh changes his mind, and then they begin pursuing the Israelites. So they're on their way out of Egypt, and Pharaoh's like, oh no, and so he starts pursuing the Israelites. And so the Israelites, it says, they cried out to the Lord, and they said to Moses, why did you bring us out here to die in the wilderness? Weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt? What have you done to us? Why did you make us leave Egypt? Didn't we tell you this would happen while we were still in Egypt? We said, leave us alone. Let us be slaves to the Egyptians. It's better to be a slave in Egypt than a corpse in the wilderness. And the first thing I want to talk about this evening is this, that fear moves us. There's our word move. Fear moves us towards self-preservation. Fear moves us towards self-preservation. Fear is one of Satan's favorite tactics. Because, and I think I'm talking to mostly people who love Jesus in this room based off the worship. I think sometimes the enemy is just as happy to make us afraid to step out than he is to make us fall into some drug addiction or sex addiction or some crazy destructive lifestyle. I think sometimes with the people of God, he's like, if I can just put enough fear in their life where they're afraid to step out and let God use them, that's good enough for me. I don't have to do all this other stuff because fear alone will keep them from doing anything else. I might not be able to take their soul, but I can keep them from saving other souls. And here's the thing, even if we don't like what's familiar, I want you to get this, even if we don't like what is familiar, oftentimes we'll want to go back to it because we know how to survive in the familiar. That's why you see people in abusive relationships, they just keep running back to the abusive relationship because even though they don't like the abuse, even though they don't like the hurt, at least they know how to survive in that. And to step out of that is to step into the unknown, and the fear of the unknown scares them more than the fear of going back to something they didn't even like. That's what's happening in this story. Think about it. These Israelites, they were slaves for 500 years. and oppressed people for 500 years. They finally get set free. In a moment of fear, a moment of seeing the enemy pursue them, what do? They want to run back to what's familiar. Even though they knew it wasn't God's best, even though they knew there was more for them, they wanted to run back to what was familiar because at least they knew how to survive in the familiar. I don't know why. I think the Spirit of God probably led me to do this, but I was just kind of curious, like, what's the opposite of fear? And I just assumed that it would say like boldness or courage. And one of the first Google results, and I'm not saying this is the way you should study the Bible, but it worked this time. One of the first Google results said that the opposite of fear is curiosity. And I was like, dang. And I started thinking about I have a 1-year-old, by the way. I've been married for 8 years. My wife isn't here because she's with the kids. She's doing her ministry right now. Thank you, babe, if you're watching on Facebook. I love you. She tries as much as possible, but sometimes, and we've been out like every night this week. But we have a almost 4-year-old daughter. She's going to be 4 in December, and then our son is 15 months old. And this kid has no fear, and the way you can tell he has no fear is he is curious about everything. Like literally, he is on our bed, which is pretty high up. He would just run off the edge of it because he's curious what happens if he just runs straight on a bed. Like he has no fear. And here's the thing. I think in the physical world that this fear can help like keep us safe. It's like I said, it's a self-preservation. But in the spiritual world, our fear can keep us from being curious about what God has for us. God has things for us in our future, but because of fear, we're not curious about those things anymore. And we're holding back and we're not stepping into those things. I believe this is what it talks about when it says to have a childlike faith, to never lose your curiosity of what God is doing. Never lose curiosity of what could happen if. What if I stepped out? What if I made this bold move? What if I declared Jesus in my school or in my family or my neighborhood? What could happen? Let the curiosity of your spirit never die. What fears are causing you to move to self-preservation and to run back, keeping you in the familiar and keeping you from God's promises? The story continues in verse 13 and says this, "But Moses told the people, 'Don't be afraid. Just stand still and watch the Lord rescue you today.' And everyone, we love quoting this. 'The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord himself will fight for you. Just stay calm.'" The second thing we're going to talk about is this, that stillness moves us towards God's preservation. Stillness moves us towards God's provision. I said the wrong word the first time. It moves us towards God's provision. So many of us are living in constant crisis. And we're constantly trying to figure it out ourselves and to fix it ourselves and to make it work ourselves and to build ourselves up and to build our own online presence or influence or whatever it may be. And we're constantly, we're trying to fix relationships. We're trying to fix financial things. We're trying to fix an addiction in our life. We're just going. And we wonder, and you look at America and you see this everywhere and we wonder why anxiety is at an all-time high because people are just constantly trying to put out their own fires, fix their own issues, and they're trying to do it on their own. But here's the paradigm shift of Christianity. If you want to move forward with God, you have to learn to be still and know that he is God. You can't move into what he has for you if you don't first learn how to be still, because Christianity is this. You guys know this. It's about what God has already done for you, not about what you can do for him. But still, as the church, we try to make it all work and say, God, look what I did for you. Look what I accomplished. Look at the sin I defeated. And God said, I'm the one who had the victory. I'm the one who bled on a cross. I'm the one. Christianity is all about what Jesus has done for you. It's not about what we have done for him. In fact, anything we do for God is only because he did it for us first, right? We can love him because he first loved us. And this doesn't mean we don't do anything, but rather everything we do is from a place of knowing God is almighty, he's sovereign, he's powerful, and ultimately he is in control. And here's what I want you to get. This idea of stillness, of being still before God, It's not the act of doing nothing. Stillness is a mindset of knowing who God is. So sometimes we like to take this, and we love like the story of Mary and Martha, and just like, I'm just going to sit at the feet of Jesus. I'm just going to lay on these altars and just rest in his presence. And trust me, I have moments like that, and those are good. We should have those moments. But God doesn't want his church just laying around doing nothing. It's a mindset of saying, God, I know you're God. You're in control. I played, I don't know if anyone played any sports. I played basketball in high school. I know you can't tell by looking at me. I was a shooter. I always say this. Like, my strength was I could hit threes. And because I don't play anymore, I'm not that good anymore, because the one thing I was good at, now I'm not that good at it. But I'm going to go with the Michael Jordan illustration because he's better than LeBron. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. But it's not even up for debate, but whatever. So let's pretend we're all in high school. In like 1996, Michael Jordan is on your team. In high school, the MJ is on your team. Like the GOATs. You would walk into that game not nervous, no anxiety. You might be nervous because of being starstruck, but you would be like we're gonna win. It's not even but you would still play, right? Like, I would still play in the game, but I would play with the mindset of we're gonna win, and I get to play with MJ. This is ridiculous. That's the type of mindset we have. The God who breathed and stars came into existence on our team. And so we don't have to sit on the sidelines. We can still jump into the game, but when we're in the game, we can know that he is for us, and if he is for us, who can be against us, right? And so we step into a mindset of stillness. Yes, I'm going to play the game. Yes, I'm going to do my part. I'm going to preach when he tells me to preach. I'm going to love when he tells me to love. I'm going to give when he tells me to give. But I'm on Jesus' team, and we're going to win, so I can be still and know that he's God, and know that the fears I see today will not be there tomorrow. Questions are simple. Are you trying to do it on your own? Do you look like the Israelites in this moment, who are in complete panic? Or are you trusting that God is in control? It continues in verse 15. It says this, Then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the people to get moving. Everyone say, get moving. Pick up your staff and raise your hand over the sea. Divide the water so the Israelites can walk through the middle of the sea on dry ground. And I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they will charge in after the Israelites. My great glory will be displayed. How many of you know it's for his glory, not for our glory? Yeah. My great glory will be displayed through Pharaoh and his troops, his chariots and charioteers. When my glory is displayed through them, all Egypt will see my glory and know that I am the Lord. And the thing we're going to end on tonight is this. It's time for us to move away from the past and towards God's promises. Let me say it like this. You can't move into what is to come without moving from what was. I've read this story, I'm a church kid, grew up in church. In fact, the church I work at now, my diapers were changed at that church. We left for about 5 years because we did ministry in other parts of the country, and God brought us back, and he's amazing, and it's like a dream come true. I totally lost my train of thought. I'll just pick up where I was. Oh, I've heard this story a million times. That's what I was saying. I've heard this story a million times, and I've never seen this. And I think because a lot of times we separate these verses. We love putting the verse on our wall, be still and know that he is God, right? We all, it looks in a cool calligraphy or something. But the very next verse, it says, get moving. So in one verse, it says, be still. And literally, the very next verse, it says, why are you crying out to me? Get moving. And I looked this word up. And the words that it used, it was journey, depart, remove, move forward, go away. And what God is saying, and he's not saying get moving, you figure it out, because what we all know, he split the sea, right? God split the sea. He's the one who made it happen. And so when he says get moving, he's not saying, all right, you guys need to figure it out, because if you don't figure it out, you're about to die because the Egyptians are coming at you. He's saying, no, I've already done it for you. Get moving. Go away from where you were and step into what's new. Step into the promises that I have for you. And I began to do more of a word study on this I'm not like a theologian, so I don't always like get into the original language, but I just was so intrigued by it. It's like, be still, get moving. So I started kind of digging into this a little bit, and if you know this, in the original Hebrew, a lot of times they didn't define words with like a definition, like we have like the dictionary, right? Like they give you like a word description of what that word means. In the original Hebrew, a lot of times it was imagery. So they would describe something with an image. And so the imagery that was related to this word, that was connected to this word, was pulling out, and here's why the tent's up here, you're probably wondering, was pulling out the stakes of your tent, packing up camp, and get moving. And here's what I feel like the Lord revealed to me, that there are some of us, God has split the sea. He is the one who brought you out of slavery. He's the one who brought you into freedom, yet you are camped out in fear. You're camped out in your brokenness. You're camped out in the history of your family. Maybe you're camped out in something God did in your life 10 years ago. And God's saying, pull the stakes out of the ground. Because there is a promised land on the other side. And as long as you stay camped out in Egypt, as long as you stay camped out in what was, I can't take you into what is to come. And so as the church, for us to get moving, we love to say, God, we want revival. We want a touch of heaven. We want to see you move. And God's like, okay, give up that sin. But God, I can't pull those stakes out. I can't pack that. I'll pack everything else, but can I just leave that tent back in Egypt? So at least I know I can go back to it when I'm having a hard night. God wants to move you into promises, but you're saying, but God, I can't give up this relationship. If I give this relationship up, I don't know if I'll ever find somebody. I don't know if I'll ever be able to. And God's saying, are you willing to take the stakes out? Maybe I know there's at least like there's a lot of young adults, and there's a specific career path that you think that you have for yourself. And God's saying, are you willing to leave that career path and step into full-time ministry, step into missions? And you're saying, but God, I can make a lot of money in this career path. Can I please just leave a couple stakes in the ground? And God is saying, pack up your tent, pack up camp, and move into the promised land. Worship team, you guys can go ahead and join me. We're going to end with just a time of worship. I believe so strong that God has more for us, that there is a touch of heaven. Amen. But I also know, even from my own life, that sometimes we cry for it, but we're not willing to pack up the tent. We're not willing to leave Egypt. We're not willing to leave what's comfortable. We're not willing to leave what God did in our lives at a youth retreat when we were 13 years old. And God's saying, hey, that was good. But I got something new for you. Yes. I have a fresh testimony for you. I have fresh freedom for you. I have fresh revelation for you. And yes, you can tell that story, but don't camp out there because I got more for you. Yes. And as long as we stay camped out in what was, God can't move us into what is to come. And so I just want to give us a chance tonight to respond to this. I believe that I'm speaking to several of you tonight. And so I want to do is I just want to turn this place into an altar. And if there's an area of your life that your stakes are still in the ground, and you love Jesus and you want him to do something, but the stakes are still in the ground. And tonight you're going to start pulling those stakes out one at a time. You're going to start folding the tent up so that you can move camp into the new things that God has for you. And so we're going to do that tonight before we close. Everyone just go ahead and close your eyes just for the sake. This could be a private moment for some people. The first thing I said tonight was that fear moves us towards self-preservation. If you find yourself running back to something because of fear, you know God has more for you, but every time you begin to step out, you begin to run back, whether that's a sin or just a way of a mindset or of life. I'm just going to ask you just to raise your hand across this room. Already more than half the room. The second thing I said, you can put your hand back down. The second thing I said was that stillness moves us towards God's provision. and you're in this place, and you can raise your hand for more than one of them, by the way, and you just find yourself frantic, like you're constantly trying to put a fire out, trying to fix something, trying to fix somebody else's life, trying to fix your own mess. And if that's you tonight you just need to learn to be still. Go ahead and raise your hand. I can definitely raise my hand to that. And the last one is tonight, if you're ready to move, to pull the stakes out, move away from the past, and begin to step into God's promises, to walk through the sea that God's already split, to walk on dry ground, and to walk through. He already did it all. Again, he did it. We just got to walk through. That's it. We just got to walk through. If that's you, go ahead and lift your hand as well. Holy Spirit, I pray for every person in this room. I pray for myself even in this prayer, God. The human tendency, God, is to want to run back to what we know. Even if what we know isn't good. Even if we know there's something better, the known can be more comfortable. And God, I lift up every person in this room. And God, I pray tonight that you would give them the spirit of curiosity. God, I pray that they wouldn't have fear, but they would have a curiosity of, God, what if I gave this up? What if I gave this relationship up? What if I gave up this sin? What if I gave up this career choice? What if I took the stakes out? And what if I stepped in? What could you do, God? And I pray the spirit of curiosity over this place. That we wouldn't lose the curiosity of what you can do if we say, God, here I am. Use me. And God, I pray that your still small voice, when we leave this place, and I know some people are going back to Atlanta, some people right here in Fort Myers and other places, that when we go back and we feel the temptation to want to go back to what's familiar, to want to go back to that sin, that mindset, even that pain, God, that we would remember this moment and say, no, I've packed up that tent and I'm walking across dry ground. That we wouldn't go back, God. That this wouldn't just be an emotional moment, God. This would be a moment of freedom. This would be a moment that where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And I pray that dreams that have been placed in people's hearts would come, God, to fruition because of this moment of curiosity. I pray that passions in people's hearts would be fulfilled because of this moment of curiosity. God, I pray that you move us from our past into the future so that we as the church can move, and so that the Spirit of God can move, and so that our nation can have a touch of heaven. God, I pray that the church wouldn't be known for people as a people who just stick in the same old, but I pray that the church would be known moving forward as people who are continuing to move forward and to continue to step into your promises. Let's go ahead and stand up in this room. As a sign of surrender, I want us just to all lift our hands. And right now, in your own words, I'm not going to pray for you. In your own words, begin to speak out those things that the Holy Spirit was speaking to your heart. Begin to speak out those sins. Begin to speak out those mindsets. Begin to speak out those fears that are keeping you staked out in Egypt. And begin to pull the stakes out. Confess those things to God right now. Confess those things to God.